Well, hello there, friends and enemies. You know who you are. We are going to look at reviewing our great and amazing document-based question, otherwise known as a DBQ. But first, let's learn about the assignment. Yes, that's right. Behind door number 1, you have your documents. What am I doing? All right, so what is your assignment you're thinking? Well, at the basic level, I want you to just self-reflect. I want you to think, hey, what would I have done differently if I had a little bit more time on this DBQ? Where did I screw up? Where did I succeed? Okay, you're going to watch this video. We're going to go over the documents. You're going to get some time to read them, to maybe read some explanations. And you're even going to get a chance to look at some essays that were submitted that were good, all right, and bad. And you want to think about, hey, why were these essays good? Why did they get a good grade? Why did these essays get a bad grade? And come to class ready to look at your own essay, to peer edit other essays, and perhaps even rewrite certain sections at home. You guys excited? On like a scale of 1 to 3.14, I'm like a solid pi, you know? No? Yes? So let's review what the DBQ prompt and documents were even all about, people. You excited? You there in the back? Okay, good. All right. So remember, the prompt was evaluate the extent to which railroads affected the process of empire building in Afro-Eurasia between 1860 and 1918. When you get one of these prompts, you have to attack it. Okay, first of all, we have a time period, 1860 to 1918. So we're in Unit 5 and a little bit going into Unit 6. And, of course, what's happening in 1918, right? We're in World War I. So immediately I'm thinking, all right, 1860, 1918, what's happening? All right, the Industrial Revolution has happened. It's the time, the second wave of imperialism, what I've called neo-imperialism in class before. Okay, we know that things are different. There's steam engines, and obviously because of this, there's trains, right? There's railroads, and we see that European powers, also the United States and Japan, are starting to build their empire around the world. So we're going to see a set of documents, and you've already seen them, but let's say you saw this for the first time. You're going to see documents, and these documents are going to tell you a story. They're going to make an argument for how it is that railroads are going to affect empire building. So that's what you're looking at here. So let's move on to the next part. Okay, before we dive right in, let's just make sure we remember we had 7 documents. We're going to look at each one of these, and what I want you to think about whenever you're looking at each document is how does this answer the prompt? How is this related to railroads affecting empire building in any way? Positive, negative, greatly, poorly, etc. You just have to see how it relates, okay? How does it relate to the prompt? That's the basic level. Then as you're looking through, you can go to the next steps, the HIPPO, the historical situation, the intended audience, the point of view, the purpose, and if you know any outside information that's outside of all the documents, all of that. So let's look at each document. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to just click through each document. You have access to each one of these links on your own. You should have clicked them, downloaded them, printed them out, used ones from class, whatever you're going to do. That way you can follow along. All right, so let's dive right in. I want you to take a second. You can pause the video. You can look at your own printout if you have it. And just take a second and read over this document. All right, great. So no doubt half of you didn't pause it, but that's okay. I'll just keep my anger inside. Anyway, what's going on here? Well, essentially, you have a bunch of high caste Hindus in India complaining. And basically that they are being forced to go into the lower classes train carriages here. And they seem to talk about the fact that women of like high birth or noble birth, they're going to be mixed in with like the normal population. They even compare it to the Middle Passage and slavery. I think they might be exaggerating a little bit there. But here's what we have. Basically, some high caste Indians are upset about the change that's happening with European rule in India on the railroads. And so let's think of how perhaps we could source this document. So I'm going to let you pause it for a second again if you'd like, and you can think about, what is the historical situation, the audience, the purpose, the point of view, maybe some outside information that could help us understand why they are feeling this way. So first you want to ask yourself, who are the British Indian Association, right? And it tells you right here, it's high caste Indians. You also want to look at that date to maybe get the historical situation. It's 1866, okay? So at this point of time, we're not looking at India having negotiated treaties through the Mughal Empire with the British East India Company, right? We're really looking at direct rule. This is after the Indian Rebellion, and so we have direct rule here, okay? So historically, there's some of this antagonistic feelings, perhaps between both sides. We also have the fact that, we're looking at the society of India, where the caste system has been very important for thousands of years. And so from the point of view of the people speaking here, are they exaggerating? Well, yeah, but also in many ways they're upset about the fact that they were the high-ranking members of society, and now they're being ignored by by the new group of people, the British, who have come in here, who are kind of seeing Indians maybe all as the same, rather than recognizing the history of the caste system and all that. And then, of course, if you're going to think like, how valid is this argument, right? Because the end result is, how trustworthy is this argument? And the first part of it, where they try to say that the horrors are equal to the Middle Passage. So you need to know what the Middle Passage is, but that's the West African slave trade, right? That's where people were given 4 feet by 2 feet of space, and people died of starvation and suffocation and disease while being sold as property and chained in boats where they were frequently assaulted. So yeah, this could go a few ways. One is, obviously, it's not anywhere near that, and so perhaps they're exaggerating for effect. But that exaggeration means, maybe I don't trust it so much. You also could think, how much maybe do they know in the 1860s in India what the Middle Passage was really like? Maybe they just know that the Middle Passage was just this bad thing, obviously much worse than just bad, but this bad thing about transit, okay, if I'm giving them the biggest benefit of the doubt. Really what I think is, I see some people complaining here. Okay, so let's take some time and move on to the next one. Okay, so just in a bit, you'll pause this again, read this document, think of how you would source it using Hippo, think of how it answers the prompt, what is it saying, does it fit with the previous document? So just take a second, pause that, and do that. And we're back. Not really for some of you. Maybe we just kept continuing. But anyway, what's happening in this document? Well, it's clear. You have a Qing Dynasty official, right? It's in the 1860s as well, very close to the other document. Qing Dynasty official, and they're saying that modern infrastructure is good. They're talking about telegraphs and railroads. However, if you're going to build them, we can't have the foreigners build them, and if the foreigners are going to build them, they have to follow some really strict rules to not make peasants mad, to not desecrate graveyards, etc. Okay, so let's think about this in terms of the sourcing on it. So what's happening at this time, all right? China is going to go through this modernization period that we talk about. I'll give you a second to think if you can remember it. It's this failed attempt at modernization. Give you a second. The self-strengthening movement. Yes, okay. So this is post-Opium War in China. This is while the Taiping Rebellion is had just finished up. You have the self-strengthening movement. You don't yet have the Boxer Rebellion, but really this is this tumultuous time in Chinese history, right? And so at the same time, Japan is going through a series of reforms and modernizing. The Ottoman Empire is attempting to as well. And that's what's happening here historically. They clearly want to modernize China, the purpose of this, but they also want to make sure they don't make people mad in doing so, specifically rural areas like peasant farmland and graveyards and etc. Basically, another purpose here, you could say that they're being very, very stringent on what they would accept for foreigners to come into China. They're still dealing with, historically, again, here we are, they're still dealing with the idea of foreigners imposing their will in China, dividing China up into spheres of influence. And then think to yourself, I'm not going to go over this again, but think to yourself how this answers the prompt. So really, how are railroads affecting empire building here? Okay, perhaps the Chinese see railroads and infrastructure building as a way to expand foreign influence. So is that what the Europeans are trying to do with this? I don't know, but it's something you should be thinking about. Okay, same thing with document 3. Just give yourself a pause and come right back. Okay, so now we're going to another part of the world. The last document I talked about, I alluded to the Ottoman Empire and the Tanzimat reforms. Here we're seeing a source coming from after the attempted reforms of the Ottoman Empire. It's written a little closer to the 1900s, and there are some similarities here that I immediately see with the Chinese document, and that is that they are pro building up this rail line, this infrastructure here, but they are also trying to keep foreign involvement, foreign investment, foreign capital out of it, because for them, it's clear that they see when you get foreign involvement in building up your infrastructure, that means you also lead the way to foreign control. So if I was going to quickly summarize this. You essentially have a government official saying, look, building a report from this major city of Damascus to the pilgrimage city of Mecca would be very beneficial for the Muslim world. It talks about the different ways of transport using shipping or going overland via camel and how these are dangerous and expensive and etc. When I look at the sourcing for this, this is clearly during the reform time period of these older empires. Remember, the Ottoman Empire will be known now as the sick man of Europe leading up into World War I. So the Ottoman Empire is seen as growing weaker and weaker throughout this time period. And Japan, China, the Ottoman Empire, again, are going through these series of reforms. Japan's being substantially more effective than the other two. But here they are, historical situation, so we went through that. But also, when you're looking at the purpose and the audience of this is clearly being geared towards the Sultan, and it's very flattering. They're talking about, how he's the Caliph, about how important he would be, how our Sultan must personally lead this highly significant undertaking. Muslims across the world hold our Sultan in very high regard, etc. Well, sure, I'm sure some do, but let's also remember that a lot of the Islamic world was Shia and didn't see this person as rightly as a caliph. Remember that he's of Turkish descent, so you're going to have some interconflict between Arabs and Persians as well. Also remember that the Ottoman Empire is a gunpowder empire and in a way was a competitor to the Mughal Empire, so, maybe. So think about that and we'll move on to document 4. All right, so here we have document 4, a little less time to read over. It's a map, really study it, see what you're thinking. Take a second, I'll pause it right here. Okay, so here we have a map showing a proposed rail line. This is something we've talked about in class before, but basically from Cairo to Cape, you've seen this, the very famous image that has Cecil Rhodes kind of straddling one boot in Egypt, one boot in South Africa, and he's maybe holding a telegraph line through his hands and all this stuff. Anyway, so what is this? This is, the height of European African imperialism, and you have Cecil Rhodes, of the former country Rhodesia, very famous person of the Rhodes Scholarship in Oxford. He's a British imperialist entrepreneur, as they tell you down here. And where is this being published? It's being published in part of the British Empire in New Zealand, in Auckland. So 1899, closer to the time of the Ottomans, talking about their proposed rail line from Damascus to Syria, still within the same time period, Unit 5, okay? So what am I seeing here? Historical context, like I just kind of alluded to, this is the height of European imperialism, especially that of British imperialism, where they're clearly seeing rail lines and control of rail lines and leading to economic expansion and geographic expansion. This is important, right? This rail line never gets built, but you clearly see that this is, an advocating for this rail line to connect the northern part of Africa to the southern part of Africa. Think about the context as well. As we've learned in the Scramble for Africa, most of this area, except for the East Africa controlled by Germany, most of this area was under British control already. Okay. The summary officially says it's intended for British officials, settlers in New Zealand, highlighting a grand imperial project elsewhere in the British Empire to instill pride in British imperial achievements. And so we can relate this to like the couplet, the ABC Patriots thing, and the couplet about the Maxim gun that's mentioned in the crash course about having more colonies than anyone else. We see this as one of the big fueling things for World War I, of imperialist nationalism, having pride and controlling more of the world. So a lot of information coming from this, and we can clearly see that at least some in the British government and system think that rail lines equate to power. All right, here's document 5. You know the drill. Just pause it, read it, think. Okay, so what's happening here? You have Sir Henry Norman, a British politician, arguing that the construction of the Trans-Siberian Railroad is going to allow Russia to dominate East Asia unless the other European powers protect their interests there. This seems very familiar now that we've learned about the run-up of World War I, of where you think that there's not just an arms race and weaponry, but really there's like a transportation race of who's going to be able to have the infrastructure to control different areas of the world. Remember that this is just a little bit before the Russo-Japanese War. Remember that this is going to be around the time of the Anglo-Japanese alliance because they're both kind of afraid of the power of Russia. That's the historical situation happening between here. It's obviously the purpose in the audience. It's intended to influence the public and government opinion, criticizing British inaction. So it's trying to influence the building of British infrastructure and a way for the British to be able to get into the East more easily. It's being a bit honest in the fact that it's not going to happen overnight, that somehow the Russians are then going to construct this great large railroad and they're going to be able to maintain it. But over time, Henry Norman's saying this is going to be a problem and England needs to do something about it. Okay, you know the drill. Give it a pause, give it a think. All right, so here we have Ernest Reume, perfect French pronunciation, I'm sure. The governor of French West Africa, he is wanting them to build a rail line not just for economic reasons, but also for moral reasons too. Okay, so let's look at the historical situation. This is the height of what we talked about in class called the white man's burden. The idea that the white Western world is on a civilizing mission through imperialism. And by conquering places, they're going to bring their economic system, their cultural systems, their religion to these places of quote-unquote barbarism, right? And so this is just that extremely racist, pseudo-scientific, ahistorical reading of the world in which the West is the only civilized place and they are just going to civilize everybody by conquering. It makes sense too. But you also have to think of it in a more critical way, okay? Because obviously this guy is going to benefit as governor of a territory if they're going to have more economic opportunities, because building rail lines is clearly going to be something that affects their economy in a positive way. So it seems that everybody really understands the importance of railroads so far. I don't want to make these webs for you and make your arguments for you. I'm just explaining the documents for you, but really think about these documents are saying different things, but in many ways, they're saying the exact same thing, which is for you to find out. All right, finally, Doc 7, you know the drill. Pause. Okay, so here we have a little bit later than some of the other ones, 1913, okay, so just before the outbreak of World War I. And here we have this lieutenant talking about how great railroads are, and that India has historically been this very diverse and culturally divided place, regionally divided religiously, divided through the caste system, and now there's this new national identity of South Asians, of Indians, because they are now connected through the rail line. I think the thing he's perhaps missing is that this unification and nationalization of India is going to be bad for England long term. You would know this certainly by the time you took your AP test, as we've learned that the unification of an Indian national identity, which wasn't fully realized because of Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and all the splitting up and partitioning of the Indian subcontinent. But this idea of a united nationalistic India is going to really be one of the things that pushes out British colonial rule. So long term, not so good for them. But he kind of missed that. Anyway, he's clearly still trying, what's his purpose, who's his audience? He's clearly trying to influence the British government in public, saying how important rail lines are. It's also in a time period while colonial rule is breaking down a little bit, especially after World War I, which is just on the eve of it. We're going to see a lot of pushes for India to become independent by figures like everyone knows, like Gandhi. And so think about that situation. Think about the purpose. This guy's really trying to hold on to power, and maybe he's trying to say everything's fine, railroad's good to the government. We don't fully know that, but it seems to be doing that. You also might notice that this one kind of sticks out, and it's a little different than some of the other documents in that it's not giving you a clear economic advantage. It's trying to maybe give you a social advantage in this instance, and it's also just wrong, but hey. And so now it's your time to shine. Argument ideas. What arguments can you make from the documents? How do the documents answer the prompt? So I want you to take some time. This is part of your assignment. Really think of how these documents make an argument. Now you can think like, oh God, I can't believe I missed this, or I definitely would have spent more time on this. And realistically, we did a much smaller version of the DBQ. So you didn't really write a full DBQ. So think like, what would I do if I wrote a full DBQ? What would I do if I had several body paragraphs? So think about that. You can write that down into your notes. And now that you know everything we've talked about and that you've come up with some ideas on your DBQ, it's time to update your DBQ. So I want you to make some notes. You don't have to fully rewrite it at this point. You maybe want to get it ready to be peer edited, to look at. Make some notes on it, some bullet points on it, scribble all over it, and then we will eventually have a partial rewriting of it. Before we get into that, though, you have some great resources here. You have some great examples to read from. So I want you to read the examples that are provided to you by College Board. I have them linked on my website. And I want you to think as you're reading them, you don't have to write this down, but really it's going to help you understand why did they receive the score that they were awarded, right? So one of these essays is going to get a perfect score, while some of them are going to get dreadful scores, right? So when you look at the imperfect essays, as I put in quote here, because even the perfect score essay is still going to have plenty of problems. Remember, these are seen as rough drafts. You've never seen the documents. You show up one day, you've taken a ton of multiple choice questions, you've written 3 SAQs, and then you're just given a chunk of time and you're given several essay prompts and you have to write this DBQ, right? We get it when we're grading this. And so it's not going to be perfect. You can still get a perfect score. So on the quote unquote imperfect ones, what did they do wrong? How could they have improved? Okay. You didn't get any of the really great ones that I've graded before where kids just write terrible things about their teachers or write song lyrics. The kids that write those song lyrics always have a lot of spelling errors too. It's quite telling. Anyway, be prepared to discuss this in class. This is going to be a participation grade on seeing like, hey, what were the weak points of these essays? What were the strong points? What could we do differently? All right, so we're going to squeeze a lot of points out of this DBQ thing. Hope you enjoyed it. And that is it. Enjoy your Simpsons references, you crazy kids. Oh, you're still here? Well, good news. I'm going to tell you that the secret to everything in the whole world is... Bye.